Okay, so this is the quick review from the other day, okay, about the cell transport activity. Okay, we are focusing today on diffusion, okay, because we are only looking at transport within the cell. We are looking at how the size of the cell affects its ability to transport materials by diffusion. Okay? Diffusion is free. It is a passive form of transport. It naturally moves all things from areas of high concentration to low concentration. Okay, that's what we call down the concentration gradient. Okay, and it will move anything through the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, so that's the method of cell transport that we're focused on in this activity. Okay, the big issues with diffusion are that it is slow over large distances. Most of the time for a cell that isn't a problem because cells are small. Okay, if a cell becomes very large, okay, then at least in terms of a cell's size, big for a cell, okay, then diffusion is going to not be as effective because it's going to take longer. Okay, the other problem with diffusion is that it's not targeted. It simply goes down the gradient. It's going to move from the area where it's produced in high concentration to any area in the cell that has a lower concentration of it. It is not Amazon Prime. It does not say it is going from this building to that address and targeted to that spot. It doesn't work that way. Okay? It simply flows from high concentration to low concentration. Okay? And so it's not always going to get large amounts of what's needed to exactly where it's needed. It's going to go anywhere where the concentration is lower. Right? Over a short distance, that's still fairly effective. Okay? It doesn't get a chance to spread out, kind of shotgun out, okay, over a short distance. Everybody all right with that idea? Okay. All right, so what we were looking at here, and I think I did this the other day in the podcast as well, right, with these two diagrams? Okay, so in a big cell, okay, so if we have a really big cell and something that is produced here has to move to here, it has a very long distance over which it has to go. Okay, diffusion can take it there, but it's going to go from here where there's lots of it to here where there's less. Okay, but there's also less of it over here. There's less of it over here. So if we have, let's just say, okay, this many units of whatever it is, here it's in very high concentration. All of those units are really close together. But as they move away, okay, they're going to areas where they're less concentrated and they very quickly become spread out. Well, by the time it gets all the way over to here, some of those objects aren't anywhere close to where they were actually needed. Maybe 3 of them get there. Okay, the other ones kind of get spread out and go everywhere else. Okay, so over a large distance, diffusion isn't really effective because it is a shotgun approach. Okay, all the pellets just kind of go everywhere. All right. In a small cell, that distance is much shorter. Those same 10 units very easily move, okay, across that small distance, and they don't get a chance to spread out nearly as much. Okay, a lot of them end up at that target, even though they weren't necessarily targeted for that spot. They just happen to more of them get there because the cell happens to be small. Okay, everybody all right with that? All right, so here's what we're working on, okay, for today. So the problem, you don't have to worry about. Okay, hypothesis. We are going to need to generate a hypothesis, but I'm going to give you a big, fat, juicy hint right now, so get ready to type. Okay, so we're looking for the relationship between the surface area and the volume in cells, okay, and how that can affect the functioning of the cell, specifically transport by diffusion. Okay, so the if part of our hypothesis should probably say that cells transport materials by what process? Diffusion. So if cells transport materials okay, the and part is going to talk about this. You're going to want to like type basically what I say here. Okay? And cell size affects transport Not the then part you have to make up, okay? But here's what the then part needs to talk about. Tell me in the then part what will happen to cell transport as a cell gets bigger, okay?
Sorry, what was the end part?
the and part is, and cell size affects transport. Okay? Then, as the cell gets bigger, you tell me. Okay? Maybe mention what we talked about just a few minutes ago about diffusion as it has to go further. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in that first chart. Okay, your chart looks much neater than this, right? But it's the same chart. Okay, we want to calculate the surface area, the volume, and the surface area to volume ratio of these three cubes. Okay, so we're just going to go through that real fast, and you're just going to write down the numbers. Okay, so for micro, the dimensions of micro are that it is a cube that is 1 by 1 by 1. We don't really care about the units so much here. We're just saying it's 1 by 1 by 1 for right now. Okay, so its surface area is going to be 1 times 1. That will give me the surface area of one of the sides. And there's how many sides to a cube? 6. 1 times 1 is 1, times 6 is 6. Okay, so its surface area is 6, and let's just say it's micrometers squared, we'll say. Okay. What's its volume? 1, yeah, because length times width times height gives you volume, right? Okay, 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. Okay, so the volume is 1 cubic micrometer. Okay, so that means that our surface area to volume ratio is 6 to 1. That's good. Okay? If we have more surface area, that is more like cell membrane area to absorb nutrients and to get rid of wastes, then we have volume to supply. That's a good situation. Okay? That's what all cells want to have, is way more surface area than volume. As a cell increases in size, the volume gets bigger faster than the surface area does, because volume has 3 dimensions and surface area only has 2. Okay? And that's what we're going to see happen here. All right, so macro is still just a cube, but it's 10 by 10 by 10. Okay, so its surface area is going to be 10 times 10, which is 100, times the number of sides, 6. So 100 times 6 is 600. All right, so its surface area is 600 square micrometers. So its surface area went up. Okay, but look what happens to its volume. 10 times 10 times 10, what's its volume? 1,000. 1,000 cubic micrometers. So we went from having a surface area that was 6 times bigger than the volume in the small cube to now having a surface area that is smaller than the volume. Okay? Our ratio is now 0.6 to 1. It's much worse. Okay? Being a big single cell means you have a huge volume and a comparably small surface area to supply it. Okay? That's a bad situation. Diffusion doesn't work well in that situation. All right, now multi-micro. Multi-micro is meant to be a multicellular organism. Okay? We're big, but we're made of a whole bunch of what? Small cells, all of which have good surface area to volume ratios. Okay? Which is why we as a multicellular organism can work. Okay? So here's the thing we need to realize about multi-micro. Yes, it's the same size as macro, but instead of having one single volume, it's now made up of a whole bunch of small volumes, 1,000 of them to be exact. Okay? So instead of being one single cell, there are now 1,000 single cells in the same space. Do they likely have better surface area to volume ratios? Yes, and here's why. Okay? The surface area of multi-micro is not the same as macro. It is the surface area of every single cell inside the cube. Okay? okay? And there are 1,000 of them. There are 1,000 of these in here. So the surface area isn't 600, it's 6,000. Okay? Is its volume still 1,000? Yeah, its volume still 1,000, it's the same size. Okay? But what just happened to our surface area to volume ratio? Yeah, not only did it go up, it actually became exactly what it is for a single cell. This is the advantage of being multicellular. You can be large and have all the advantages of being big without all the disadvantages of being a big single cell. Yes. Okay, so now you got that chart filled out. That's 5 marks. As long as you copy down the numbers correctly, you get 5 marks. Sweet deal, right? It is a pretty sweet deal. All right, now for the analysis questions. Okay, question number 1 is asking when the cube dimensions increase from 1 to 10. It says centimeters here, we did micrometers, no big deal. Okay, so basically when we go from micro to macro, the increase is a factor of 10. Okay, but what's the factor of increase for the surface area? So basically they're saying go back to this chart and tell me how many times bigger is the surface area of macro than micro? And how many times bigger is the volume? Okay, so all you have to do is do a little division. Okay, and you've got the factors there. Okay, for question number 2, for the 2 big cubes, that's macro, and multi-micro, the size and the volume have a factor of 1. That means they are the same. They are the same size. Okay, calculate the factor for the difference in surface area between these 2 cubes. So basically it's saying go back here and tell me how many times bigger is the surface area of multi-micro than macro. How many times bigger? Easy calculation. Okay. And then it says calculate, sorry, that was surface area. And then for number 3, for which of the 2 cubes does the ratio between volume and surface area change when the size increases? So here's what they're asking for that, because it's really worded poorly. Okay, what they're saying is when one of these gets bigger, okay, or when all of these get bigger, does their surface area to volume ratio change? So if micro becomes bigger, it becomes macro. Agreed? Surface area to volume ratio changes. Okay, if macro got bigger, its surface area to volume ratio would also change. But if multi-micro gets bigger, will its surface area to volume ratio change? No, because it will fill up with, right, it's multicellular. If it gets bigger, it's not that each individual cell gets bigger, it's that it makes more. That's how being multicellular works, so that you have to kind of find a way to explain that for your answer. That question is worded so poorly, I basically have to give the answer away because nobody understands what it's saying. Okay? All right. Now, for number 4, I need to give you the better sizes here. Okay. So number 4 is asking you about does the cell's shape affect its surface area to volume ratio? We were looking at very simple shapes, just cubes. Okay, now we're looking at different shapes. So A is still a cube. A is still 10 by 10, okay, by 10. So it's easy. We've already done those calculations. All right. Now, B is 5 by 10 by 20. And C is 1 by 10 by 100. Okay? They all have the same volume. But calculate their surface area and tell me, does the shape affect their surface area to volume ratio? Okay? So basically you're kind of making another chart like the first one we made. You're just getting the surface area to volume ratio for these shapes instead. Okay? For question number 5, okay? Question number 5 is now saying, all right, you did this with fake cells. Now here's real cells. A liver cell is like A, okay? A skin cell is like B, and a nerve cell is kind of like C, right? You have some nerve cells that run through your spine that are up to 1 meter long. Single cell, 1 meter long, but they're super skinny, okay? And that's how they can maintain that surface area to volume ratio. So you got to talk about the situations these cells could be in, okay? Think about a cell in your liver. Are there lots of blood vessels in the liver? Okay? Does its shape really matter a whole lot if it's well supplied with blood? Okay? Think about a skin cell. it only gets supplied with blood and nutrients on maybe 3 out of the 6 sides, okay, maybe 4 out of the 6 sides, okay, but it's certainly not supplied on all sides, so its shape is a little bit different, it's a little flatter, okay, and then you've got your nerve cell, which runs down your spinal column, okay, but would probably have blood vessels running along its length, okay, something like that. Think about the situations they're in and how their shape is kind of adapted to that to still keep that diffusion part happening. Okay, and for number 6, okay, red blood cells. Okay, red blood cells have a biconcave shape. Okay, talk about how that might affect their surface area to volume ratio. If that shape is advantageous for their job, which is to carry oxygen on their surface, okay, around in your blood. And then number 7 is basically what we talked about at the beginning of the class. Okay, what effect would a low surface area to volume ratio have on intracellular transport? Would it work good? Basically, does it work good in a big cell, and why? Okay, or why not? And then for your conclusion, copy-paste hypothesis. Did our math work out? Okay, did it say what we thought? All right, okay, have at it.